True story, they called me a burden, but the inheritance was my final act of revenge. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into someone, only to have them cast you aside when you're no longer useful? Have you ever poured your heart and soul into someone, only to have them cast you aside when you're no longer useful? Have you ever poured your heart and soul into someone, only to have them cast you aside when you're no longer useful? Have you ever watched the child you devoted your life to cast you aside for the person they married? Have you ever felt that sting, that deep, hollow ache in your chest, knowing your own flesh and blood would stand by silently while you were stripped of your dignity? I have. Oh, I have. But they didn't know I would be the one to write the final chapter of their story, did they? They thought they had me figured out, thought I was just some frail, old woman with nothing left but memories and a small pension. They were wrong. So terribly, deliciously wrong. The final insult came on a Tuesday evening, a night that will forever be etched in my memory like a jagged scar. It was supposed to be a family dinner, one of those strained affairs Xana insisted upon to maintain appearances. Her idea of a family was a carefully curated tableau, designed to project an image of effortless perfection to the outside world, even as she subtly undermined me at every turn, picking at my composure like a vulture at carrion. The air in their opulent dining room, a vast space with soaring ceilings and polished mahogany furniture that seemed to swallow all warmth, was thick with unspoken tension. It smelled faintly of lilies, Xana's favorite, a scent I now associated with her cold, elegant cruelty, mixed with the greasy aroma of a suspiciously expensive takeout meal, a gourmet Thai curry, if I recall correctly, something I knew she despised cooking herself. Oren, my son, my only son, was there too, sitting across from me at the impossibly long table, looking as uncomfortable as a stray cat in a dog kennel. His shoulders were hunched, his usually bright eyes downcast, fixed on his plate as if the mashed potatoes held the secrets of the universe. He wouldn't meet my gaze, not even for a fleeting second, and that familiar wave of disappointment, a dull throb behind my ribs, began to spread. I had just politely declined a second glass of Xana's overpriced Sauvignon Blanc, explaining my stomach felt a little off. That's all it took. That small, innocuous comment, a simple statement about my mild indigestion. Xana, my daughter-in-law, a woman who cultivates an image of pristine elegance while harboring a viper's tongue, cleared her throat dramatically. It wasn't a natural sound, it was a performance, designed to draw every eye in the room, to signal that something important, something she deemed important, was about to be said. Her perfectly manicured hand, adorned with a diamond the size of a pigeon's egg that seemed to mock my own simple gold wedding band, gestured dismissively in my direction. Her eyes, usually masked by a veneer of polite indifference, were glinting with a predatory light I had come to recognize all too well. Mother Elara, she began, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache, we need to talk about your arrangements. My fork, poised mid-air, clattered onto my plate, the sound echoing unnervingly in the silence. Arrangements? What arrangements? My mind raced, trying to grasp her meaning, a cold dread beginning to coil in my stomach. Oren shifted in his seat, a barely perceptible movement, but I saw it. His eyes remained glued to his plate. That was the first prick, sharper than any barb Xana could throw. His silence. His utter, damning silence. Oren and I, she continued, her voice gaining an edge now that she had my full, terrified attention, we've been discussing things for quite some time now. With the business struggling, and, well, your increasing needs, it's simply becoming unsustainable. My needs? My increasing needs? The words were a slap, cold and unfeeling. I, who had poured nearly all of my late husband's modest savings, and a good chunk of my own, into Oren's failing venture just last year. I, who cooked their family meals twice a week, carefully preparing healthy, wholesome dishes because Xana claimed to be too busy to lift a finger in the kitchen. I, who looked after the grandchildren when Xana was too busy with her important charity events, read lavish luncheons and spa days, and quietly paid for half of the groceries, despite their constant complaints about their financial woes. They spoke of their struggles, yet Xanda's wardrobe seemed to expand with every passing month, and their vacations grew more extravagant. They worried about my needs while dining on gourmet takeout and planning trips to Paris. The hypocrisy was a bitter pill. Xanda leaned forward, her eyes, now gleaming with something akin to triumph, fixed on me. We think it's time you considered a more structured living situation. An assisted living facility. They have wonderful programs, activities, and frankly, Mother Alara, you'd be much safer there. We worry about you here, all alone. Alone. I was alone, yes, in my own home, a home that felt less and less like mine with every passing year, every invasive suggestion from Xanda, every piece of my history she pushed aside. But safer? Was she truly worried about my safety, or was she worried about her perception of me being a burden, an inconvenient truth marring her perfect facade? The subtext was clear, screamed from her condescending smile: I was old, I was in the way, and I was a drain on their increasingly strained resources. My gaze flickered to Oren. He was still staring at his plate, a flush creeping up his neck, a telltale sign of his discomfort, his shame. Oren, I said, my voice barely a whisper, betraying the hurricane brewing inside me, what is she talking about? He cleared his throat, a pathetic, almost inaudible sound. He finally lifted his eyes, but they darted around the room, settling on nothing, on no one. Mom, it's just for your own good. Xanda's right. The business is, well, it's tight. And we just want to make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of? By sending me away. My son, my beautiful, kind-hearted boy, now reduced to a puppet, mouthing the words of his entitled wife. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the clinking of Xanda's expensive cutlery as she resumed eating, a smirk of satisfaction now firmly in place. He didn't defend me. He didn't utter a single word of protest. He didn't even look at me. That was the moment. That was the precise second my patience, stretched thin over decades, finally snapped. The dam broke. My heart hardened, not with sadness, but with a cold, righteous fury I hadn't known I possessed. And you think this was the first time? Oh, if only. If only that Tuesday evening had been an isolated incident, a rare lapse in judgment. No, dear friend, that was just the grand finale of a symphony of subtle slights, cutting remarks, and outright dismissals that had been playing for years. A lifetime, it felt like, of pouring myself out for my son, only to be deemed insignificant, a relic of a bygone era. It started subtly, as these things always do. When Oren first brought Xanda home, she was charming, almost overwhelmingly so. She had a way of looking at you, of tilting her head slightly, as if every word you spoke was a pearl of wisdom. She praised my cooking, specifically my apple pie, calling it divine. She admired my humble garden, a riot of colorful blooms and fragrant herbs, declaring it absolutely enchanting, with a theatrical sigh. She spoke of how much she respected family, how important tradition was to her. Foolish, naive Alara, I swallowed it whole. I thought, finally, a daughter. My husband, bless his soul, had passed away a few years prior, and I longed for that feminine connection, a kindred spirit in the quiet hum of my home. I saw her as a chance to expand my small, quiet family, to fill the void Arthur had left. What I didn't see was the calculating glint in her eyes, the way she assessed everything, from my worn, comfortable furniture to the age of my modest car, already mentally cataloging them, judging them, planning their eventual replacement. The first hint of her true nature, the first scratch on that perfectly polished facade, came when they got engaged. Oren had just started his struggling business, a small tech startup that always seemed to be on the brink of collapse, perpetually in need of a new injection of funds. He needed capital, a significant sum to keep the venture afloat. I, ever the doting mother, the one who always believed in her son's dreams, offered a substantial sum, a significant portion of the life insurance money my late husband had left me. It wasn't a small amount, it was enough to have comfortably seen me through my own retirement for several years. It's an investment in your future, my dear boy, I told him, full of pride and hope for his success. I truly believed I was helping him build something meaningful. Xanda, though, looked at me with an odd mixture of gratitude and something else, something dismissive, almost pitying. "Oh, Mother Elara," she'd purred, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "you're so sweet, so old-fashioned. Just giving away your money like that." It wasn't gratitude she felt, not truly. It was pity, mixed with a touch of contempt for my supposed naivete, my seemingly poor financial management. She saw it as my small pension being chipped away, not as a valuable, heartfelt contribution to her husband's future. She was already calculating what she could extract, how easily I could be manipulated. Over the years, her true colors bled through, slowly at first, then with increasing brazenness. Our family dinners, once warm and lively affairs filled with laughter and stories, became battlegrounds for Xanda to showcase her superiority. She'd meticulously critique my home, my clothes, even the way I brewed my tea. "Mother Elara, darling, that floral print is just so quaint," she'd say, a smirk playing on her lips, knowing full well I cherished that dress, a gift from Arthur on our last anniversary. She knew it made me feel elegant, but she wanted me to feel dated. Or she'd insist on redecorating my living room, replacing my comfortable, beloved armchair, where Arthur and I had spent countless evenings reading together, with a stiff, modern monstrosity she called artistic. My protests, my gentle suggestions that perhaps it didn't quite fit the room, were met with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand and a condescending, "Oh, you just don't understand modern aesthetics, dear. It's all about minimalism and clean lines now." She made me feel like an uncultured, out-of-touch relic, someone whose opinions held no weight, someone whose very existence was an inconvenient reminder of a less sophisticated era. My generosity, which I had always considered a virtue, a core part of who I was, became a weapon in her hands. She'd constantly hint at their financial difficulties, especially Oren's business woes, knowing I would always step in. "Oren needs a new laptop for the business, Mother Elara, a really high-end one, but we just can't afford it with all these bills," she'd sigh dramatically, just loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. Or it would be the unexpected repair bill for their luxury car, a surprise tuition hike for the grandchildren's elite private school, a sudden need for a business trip that suspiciously coincided with a luxury resort opening. And I would open my purse, again and again, sacrificing my own small comforts, delaying a much-needed roof repair on my own house, giving up a small trip I'd planned with friends, foregoing a new winter coat, for their needs. My savings dwindled, a steady drain that left me with a gnawing anxiety, but I kept telling myself it was for Oren, for his future, for the grandchildren. I believed, foolishly, that my sacrifices would earn me respect, love, a secure place in their family. Instead, it earned me disdain. Xanda saw my constant giving not as strength, but as a weakness, a testament to my inability to manage money, an affirmation of her belief that I was a gullible old woman with no real assets beyond what little pension I received. The way she treated me in front of the grandchildren was particularly heartbreaking. Those sweet children, my only real joy in those years. When I would offer to babysit, she'd agree, but then give me a list of highly specific, almost impossible instructions, delivered with a sternness usually reserved for unruly employees, as if I were a new, untrustworthy nanny. "And make sure they don't watch any of those old cartoons, Mother Elara, they're far too violent and outdated. Only educational programming. And only organic, gluten-free snacks, of course. Absolutely no refined sugar." She'd then leave me with a look that said, "Don't mess this up, you old fool. My children are delicate." When I offered to help with school projects, eager to share my knowledge and bond with them, she'd hover, correcting my suggestions, often taking over entirely, pushing me aside with a dismissive, "Oh, bless your heart, Mother Elara, but the way they teach math now is entirely different. You wouldn't understand. It's all about modern methodologies." It was a constant belittling, a systematic erosion of my self-worth, always delivered with a sickly sweet smile that made it impossible to confront her without looking like the unreasonable one, the difficult old woman. And Oren? My son, my sweet boy, who once held my hand and listened to my every word with wide-eyed admiration. He drifted away, slowly, imperceptibly at first, then with alarming speed. Xandha was a master manipulator. She'd sow seeds of doubt, twisting my words, planting insidious suggestions, and painting me as the difficult one, the meddling mother-in-law. Your mother was complaining about the new car, Oren, she'd say, a casual sigh escaping her lips, when all I'd done was express concern about their mounting debt and the extravagant purchase. She thinks we're too extravagant, too irresponsible. Oren, caught between his wife's relentless pressure and his vague, fading sense of filial duty, simply became silent. His once sparkling eyes would cloud over, his shoulders slump as if bearing an invisible weight. He'd avoid eye contact, mumble vague agreements to Xandha, and retreat into himself, into the safe haven of his phone or a distant television screen. He became Xandha's puppet, a shadow of the strong, independent man I had raised. I remember one Christmas. I had spent weeks knitting beautiful, handmade sweaters for the grandchildren, putting all my love and care into each stitch, imagining their delighted faces. I chose soft, merino wool in their favorite colors. When I presented them, wrapping each one in tissue paper and a festive bow, Xandha took one look and sniffed, her nose wrinkling in distaste. Oh, Elara. So, cozy. But you know, the children only wear designer clothes now. They'd be absolutely ridiculed at school in something like this. It's simply not practical. She laughed, a brittle, dismissive sound that pierced through me. Oren, again, said nothing. He watched, his face blank, devoid of any emotion, as the sweaters, symbols of my love and effort, were tossed carelessly onto a nearby chair, never to be worn, never even to be acknowledged again. That night, I cried myself to sleep, a silent, desolate weeping that soaked my pillow. It wasn't just about the sweaters, it was about the years of being unseen, unheard, unappreciated. It was about my son's complicity, his silent betrayal, the way he allowed me to be diminished without a single word of defense. Each slight, each dismissive glance, each ignored suggestion chipped away at my spirit, leaving me feeling hollowed out, a ghost in my own family. I had given everything, and they had taken it all, leaving me with nothing but the bitter taste of their contempt. They thought I was a blank slate, a well that would never run dry, a meek old woman who would simply wither away. But they didn't know. They didn't know about the final secret my late husband left me. My late husband, Arthur. He was a quiet man, unassuming, often overlooked by others who mistook his gentle demeanor for a lack of ambition. But he possessed a sharp mind and a foresight that often surprised me, a knack for seeing value where others saw only barren land. Years ago, long before Oren was even a teenager, Arthur had invested a small sum, a mere pittance really, a few $100s he'd saved from odd jobs, in a plot of undeveloped land on the outskirts of the city. It was just scrub brush and a few old trees then, considered worthless by most, certainly by the developers who bypassed it for more promising areas closer to the burgeoning suburbs. Everyone said he was wasting his money, but Arthur had a twinkle in his eye whenever he spoke of it. "It's for our retirement, Elara," he'd say, his voice soft but firm, "or a nest egg for Oren, if he ever truly needs it. But only if he truly needs it, not just wants it for some frivolous pursuit." He always emphasized that distinction, a quiet caution I barely registered at the time. He kept the deed separate, tucked away in a dusty old safe deposit box that only he and I knew about, hidden behind some old family photographs and his grandfather's pocket watch. It wasn't something we ever spoke of to Oren, or to anyone else for that matter. It was our quiet little secret, a symbol of Arthur's careful planning and his boundless love for our family. After Arthur passed, the deed lay forgotten for years. My grief was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that muted the world. Frankly, my mind was elsewhere, consumed by the everyday struggle of single motherhood. I moved through life in a fog, focused on raising Oren, managing our small home, and making ends meet on a widow's modest pension. The land was a distant memory, a whisper from a past life, like a forgotten dream. Oren, for his part, assumed whatever assets my father had were tied up in the house and my small pension. He knew nothing of this land. He and Xantha, in their grand plans for his future inheritance, only ever spoke of the house, perhaps a small life insurance payout I might have had left from Arthur's modest policy, never anything more substantial. They believed they knew the full extent of my financial situation, and they believed it was pitiful, limited, and easily exploitable. That belief was their greatest blind spot, their fatal flaw. It was during one of my deeper moments of despair, after Xantha had dismissed my carefully chosen, handmade birthday gift for Oren, a beautifully embroidered handkerchief, a nod to his grandfather's style, as tacky, and Oren had just sighed and looked away, unable to meet my eyes, that I remembered the deed. I was rummaging through Arthur's old papers, trying to find some comfort in his familiar handwriting, a connection to a time when I felt truly loved and valued, when my fingers brushed against the familiar, heavy envelope, slightly yellowed with age. The deed. The land. My heart gave a jolt, a sudden surge of adrenaline. I pulled it out, dusted it off, and stared at the old parchment, its intricate script detailing boundaries and parcels. In my hands, I held not just a piece of paper, but a forgotten legacy, a dormant power, a potential escape. A flicker of hope, something I hadn't felt in years, ignited within me. I started doing some research, discreetly, mind you, careful not to arouse suspicion. Online, I searched property records. At the library, I pored over old maps and city planning documents. I even made a few anonymous calls to real estate agents, posing as someone simply curious about land values in certain areas. What I discovered sent a shockwave through me, a powerful jolt of pure, unadulterated revelation. The city had expanded rapidly over the past decade, sprawling outwards like an insatiable beast. That worthless plot of land Arthur had bought, the one everyone had scoffed at, had become prime real estate, nestled right against a newly designated nature preserve, a green lung for the expanding metropolis. Its value had skyrocketed beyond anything Arthur or I could have ever imagined. Not only that, but environmental conservancy groups were actively looking to acquire parcels of land adjacent to the preserve to expand the protected area. They were willing to pay premium prices, often above market value, to ensure the land remained untouched by developers, a sanctuary of wild beauty. The knowledge settled in my heart like a warm, heavy stone, a precious gem I had unknowingly carried all these years. Here it was. My trump card. The means to secure my own future, to finally free myself from Xantha's suffocating control and Oren's shameful, complicit silence. For years, I had believed I was trapped, dependent on their generosity, which was anything but. I had believed my only option was to endure, to shrink myself until I was small enough to be overlooked, insignificant enough to avoid their scorn. But Arthur, in his quiet wisdom, had given me an escape route, a path to independence I never knew existed. The decision didn't come lightly, not at first. My initial thought was, of course, to sell it and give the money to Oren, to save his struggling business, to alleviate their burdens and finally prove my worth. That was the old Alara, the one who always put her son first, always sacrificed, always sought approval. But then I remembered the Tuesday evening. I remembered Xantha's cold, calculating eyes, her cruel words about assisted living, about my increasing needs, delivered with such relish. I remembered Oren's blank face, his cowardly silence, his inability to even meet my gaze. I remembered the years of subtle abuse, the erosion of my dignity, the feeling of being a financial drain despite being their lifeline, their unwitting patron. The image of those handmade sweaters, tossed aside like rags, flashed in my mind. The endless stream of my money, disappearing into Xantha's designer handbags and lavish parties, used to fund a life they claimed they couldn't afford. The profound, heartbreaking disappointment in my son, the boy I had raised with such love and care, now a stranger controlled by a manipulative woman. No. Not this time. They saw me as a burden. They believed I had nothing. They wanted to discard me. Then I would show them what a burden truly was. I would show them what happened when you pushed a quiet woman too far. The decision solidified, hardening into an unshakable resolve. I would sell the land. Not for Oren, not for his failing business, and certainly not for Xanda's lavish lifestyle. I would sell it for myself. To secure my own comfortable future, to live out my remaining years with peace and dignity, free from their contempt and their relentless demands. And I would do it in a way that left them with nothing, absolutely nothing, from this legacy that they believed was rightfully theirs, or soon would be. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through me, a thrilling, exhilarating sense of power. It wasn't revenge in the petty sense, it was a reclaiming of my life, my worth, and a potent, undeniable lesson for those who had so cruelly underestimated me. The quiet strength Arthur always saw in me was finally, gloriously, awakening. And then, the day came. The day everything would be laid bare. It wasn't planned, not in the meticulously calculated way Xanda would have orchestrated it, with carefully chosen words and a staged setting. Rather, an opportunity presented itself, an almost divine moment, and I seized it. It was another one of their dreaded Sunday family dinners, barely a week after the humiliating, assisted living, conversation. The tension was still thick, a palpable weight in the air, a silent accusation hanging between us. Oren avoided my gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the unresolved nastiness, fidgeting in his seat, his fork making nervous clinks against his plate. Xanda, however, was in her element, holding court at the head of the table, animatedly discussing her upcoming trip to Paris, a trip I knew was entirely unaffordable given Oren's business struggles. She even dared to bring up the assisted living again, casually mentioning brochures she'd picked up from a charming new facility near the botanical gardens. "They have lovely garden views, Mother Elara," she purred, her eyes alight with a cruel glee. "I think you'd just adore them. So much greener than your old garden, wouldn't you say?" Her tone was sickeningly sweet, a thinly veiled threat disguised as thoughtful concern. I sat there, sipping my herbal tea, a quiet storm brewing inside me, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. I had already made the arrangements, quietly, efficiently, over the past few days. I had contacted the Environmental Conservancy Group. They were thrilled, beyond thrilled, to acquire the land, expressing their gratitude profusely. The paperwork was nearly complete, just awaiting the final signatures. The substantial sum, far more than I had ever imagined, a figure that made my head spin, would be in my account within days. The timing felt almost divine, a celestial wink of approval from Arthur himself. Xanda was mid-sentence, pontificating about the superiority of Parisian croissants over anything I could ever bake, her voice a theatrical drone, when I decided. This was it. The moment. I took a deep breath, and then, calmly, I interrupted her. "Xanda," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through her monologue like a sharp knife through silk. Her eyes, surprised at my sudden interjection, narrowed slightly, her perfect smile faltering. Oren, startled by the unexpected sound of my voice, finally looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "There's something I need to discuss with both of you," I continued, my gaze sweeping from Xanda's suddenly wary face to Oren's anxious one, taking in their shocked expressions. "It pertains to my future. And, by extension, yours." Xanda scoffed, recovering her composure quickly. "Oh, Mother Elara, we've already covered this. Oren and I have made it perfectly clear, an assisted living facility is the most sensible option for everyone involved. It's for your own good, and frankly, ours." "Is it?" I asked, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips, a hint of the satisfaction I felt bubbling up within me. "Perhaps you'll reconsider when you hear what I have to say." I reached into my handbag, a worn leather purse that Xanda had once openly mocked as decidedly unfashionable, and reminiscent of a bygone era, and pulled out a crisp, official-looking document. It wasn't the original deed, that was safely with my lawyer, but a certified copy, along with a formal letter from the Conservancy, detailing the terms of sale, including the staggering sum. The papers were pristine, unlike my old purse, a stark contrast to the image they had of me, a testament to the meticulous care I had taken in securing my future. I laid the documents flat on the polished mahogany dining table, pushing them gently towards them. Xandha eyed them suspiciously, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "What is this, Mother Elara? Some sort of will amendment? Don't tell me you're trying to complicate things further with some last-minute nonsense." Her voice was laced with impatience, bordering on outright contempt, as if my very existence was a constant inconvenience. "No, Xandha," I said, my voice gaining strength, each word deliberate, precise. "This is not a will amendment. This is a deed. To the land Arthur bought all those years ago. The one he kept secret. The one you and Oren assumed was worthless, if you even knew it existed at all." Xandha's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror as she scanned the words on the page, the legal jargon slowly forming into an undeniable truth. Her perfectly made-up face paled, the carefully applied foundation suddenly stark against her skin. "Land? What land? We never knew about any land." She snatched the paper, her elegant fingers trembling slightly as she read the legal description, then the address, her gaze darting from line to line. Oren, beside her, leaned in, his brow furrowed, a flicker of recognition, a vague memory, in his eyes as he saw the name of the area. He must have vaguely remembered snippets from childhood, stories of his father's quirky investments, though he'd never connected them to any significant asset. "It's a rather valuable piece of property now, isn't it?" I stated, my voice calm, almost conversational, yet each word landed like a stone, creating ripples of disbelief across their faces. Especially with the Environmental Conservancy actively buying up parcels adjacent to the nature preserve. They were very eager to acquire it, in fact. Offered a rather substantial sum. Far more than Arthur ever dreamed, I imagine. Xandha's gasp was audible, a sharp, choked sound. Her head snapped up, her eyes, usually so calculating, now wide with disbelief and pure, unadulterated greed. The horror of what she was realizing mixed with the furious resentment of what she had lost. A substantial sum? But that land, Oren always said father had no other significant assets. This must be part of his inheritance. Our inheritance. Her voice rose, a hysterical edge creeping in, her composure completely shattered. "Oh, Xandha," I said, leaning back in my chair, enjoying the moment of pure, raw shock on her face, the way her carefully constructed world was crumbling before her eyes. "How quickly things change when there's money involved, isn't it? Funny, just moments ago I was a burden, who needed to be shipped off to a facility, a drain on your resources. Now, suddenly, I'm holding your inheritance." I let the question hang in the air, thick with irony, the bitter taste of their hypocrisy filling the space between us. My gaze then shifted to Oren. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, shock, confusion, dawning understanding, and, finally, a deep, sickening shade of regret. He finally looked at me, truly looked at me, and I saw the shame flooding his eyes, the full weight of his past actions crashing down on him. "Mom, what are you saying? You're selling it?" His voice was barely a whisper, laced with a plea I had heard too many times before. "Indeed, Oren," I confirmed, my voice unwavering, resolute. "I already have. The deal is finalized. The funds will be in my account by the end of the week. Enough to secure my future, and then some." I watched as his jaw dropped, his face turning ashen, the full weight of my revelation crashing down on him. But the business. Our debts. Mom, you know how tight things are. This could save everything, he stammered, his voice desperate, a raw, naked plea in his eyes. The puppet was finally speaking, finally finding his voice, but only now, when his own future, his own comfort, was threatened. Only now did he care to engage. "Yes, Oren, I do know how tight things are," I said, my voice now laced with the reproach I had held back for so long, a lifetime of suppressed anger finding its release. "Because I've spent years pouring my own meager savings, my late husband's legacy, into your tight business, while you stood by and watched your wife treat me like a servant, like a fool, like a financial drain. I've listened to her call me a burden, while she spent thousands upon thousands on designer clothes and lavish trips. I've sacrificed my comfort, my peace, my dignity, for you, for your family, for a dream you never quite managed to realize. And what did I get in return? Silence. Disrespect. And a demand to move into an assisted living facility, to be conveniently out of sight and out of mind. Xantha, regaining some semblance of composure, though her face was still contorted with fury, her lips thin and tight, interjected, "You can't do this. This is unfair. This is malicious. That land was meant for Oren. It's his legacy. His father would have wanted him to have it." Legacy? I scoffed, a genuine laugh escaping my lips, a sound of bitter amusement that held no joy. "My dear, the only legacy you and Oren seem interested in is what you can extract from others. This land was Arthur's secret. He left it to me. And I, as the sole owner, the one who held on to it, who remembered it, have decided its fate. It will be sold to the Environmental Conservancy. It will remain untouched, a beautiful testament to nature, a place of quiet strength and enduring value, unlike the lives you two have made such a mess of with your greed and your constant pursuit of superficiality." I rose from my chair, the document still splayed on the table between them, a tangible symbol of their colossal loss, of their ruined expectations. "You see," I continued, my voice now firm, resolute, "you believed I had nothing. You believed I was a naive, old woman with no real assets beyond my pension, a convenient source of funds for your extravagant lifestyle. You called me a burden. Well, a burden has just secured her own comfortable future, entirely independent of either of you. You will not benefit from this land. Not a single penny. The only thing you will inherit from this, is the knowledge of what you lost, and why." Xantha's face was a mask of pure, incandescent rage, mixed with a shocking realization of what she had lost, a fortune she never knew existed, snatched from her grasp. Oren stared at me, his eyes wide, the shame now mixed with a desperate, crushing regret, a profound sense of loss. He saw, in that moment, not just the loss of the land, but the loss of me, the mother he had so carelessly abandoned, the bridge he had so thoughtlessly burned. The silence that followed was no longer deafening, it was heavy, suffocating, filled with the echoes of their ruined expectations, their shattered illusions of an easy, privileged future. I simply turned, walked out of their opulent dining room, leaving them amidst their carefully curated perfection and the substantial debts Xantha's lavish spending had accumulated. The final chapter, as I had promised myself, was truly mine to write. So where is my daughter-in-law who called me the maid now, you ask? Well, darling, life has a funny way of delivering its own lessons, often with a cruel, poetic justice. After my departure, the house that Xantha had painstakingly filled with designer furniture and artistic pieces, the one she lorded over me, the symbol of her supposed superiority, started to feel the pinch. With no more naive, old Alara to bail them out, to discreetly cover their mounting bills and supplement their lavish lifestyle, Oren's struggling business finally, irrevocably, crumbled. The loans I had so generously given him, the substantial sums that had kept him afloat for years, were repaid with a small, desperate sum he managed to scrounge from selling off equipment, barely a fraction of what he owed. But the mountain of debt Xantha had amassed, the designer clothes, the luxury vacations, the endless stream of expensive takeout meals, the constant upgrades to a house they couldn't truly afford, that remained, a suffocating weight around their necks. Without my continuous financial infusions, and with Oren's business gone, their carefully constructed facade of wealth collapsed. Xantha, who lived for appearances and social climbing, who measured her self-worth by the size of her diamond and the exclusivity of her social circle, found herself utterly exposed. The private school tuition for the grandchildren became impossible to pay, forcing them into public school, much to Xantha's utter mortification. Her friends, the ones who had admired her lavish lifestyle, her seemingly endless supply of champagne and designer bags, slowly drifted away when the parties stopped, when the trips to Paris ceased, and when the designer bags became less frequent. She was forced to take a job, a low-paying administrative position, something she'd always sneered at, calling it, beneath her, a task for unambitious people. The social butterfly who thought she was untouchable was grounded, her once vibrant wings clipped by the very financial realities she had always dismissed as Oren's problem. Last I heard, they were struggling desperately to keep up with the mortgage, their dream home becoming a daily nightmare, a constant reminder of their downfall. Xanda is no longer hosting lavish dinners, she's too busy trying to figure out how to pay the electricity bill and worrying about groceries. Her once vibrant, entitled energy has been replaced by a bitter, drawn weariness. The sparkle in her eye has been extinguished, replaced by the dull ache of consequence, the cold reality of her choices. And Oren? My son, who chose silence over defending his mother, who allowed me to be diminished for the sake of his wife's approval. He tried to reach out, of course. Desperate texts, apologetic phone calls, even a few tearful voicemails, filled with stammered apologies and promises of change. He tried to apologize, to explain, to beg for another chance, another bailout. But the well had run dry. My heart, once so soft and forgiving towards him, had hardened like granite, forged in the fires of their betrayal. I listened to his pleas, sometimes, but I no longer felt the familiar pull to rescue him. He had made his bed. He had to lie in it, to face the consequences of his complicity. He learned, perhaps too late, that a mother's love, while vast, is not boundless, and that silence in the face of injustice is a form of betrayal, a wound that can never truly heal. He's now working 2 jobs, trying to keep his family afloat, a far cry from the promising entrepreneur he once imagined himself to be, the future he so eagerly sacrificed me for. The regret in his voice is palpable, a constant reminder of the choices he made, the mother he lost. I don't wish them ill, not truly. But I also feel no compulsion to rescue them from the consequences of their actions. My conscience is clear. As for me, the funds from the land sale secured a future beyond my wildest dreams. I sold my old house, too, the one filled with so many memories, and lately, with too much of Xanda's intrusive influence. I bought a lovely, smaller cottage by the sea, a place I'd always dreamed of but never thought possible, a quaint haven nestled amongst sand dunes and the sound of crashing waves. It has a beautiful, untamed garden where I grow my own herbs and flowers, a cozy fireplace where I read on chilly evenings, and, most importantly, peace. True peace. I have enough to live comfortably, to travel a little, to pursue my hobbies without a single worry about money or disapproval. I finally feel free, light, truly myself again, unburdened by their expectations and demands. The quiet strength Arthur always saw in me has finally blossomed, flourishing in the freedom I have reclaimed. I learned that sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is to walk away from those who diminish you, who chip away at your spirit, and to reclaim your own worth, even if it means leaving those you once loved to face their own reckoning. Never test anyone's patience to its limits, especially not a quiet woman who has spent a lifetime giving. You never know what hidden strengths, or forgotten legacies, they might possess. Are there any other mothers out there who have forgotten themselves for the sake of their children's happiness, only to be cast aside? Have you endured silent betrayals, subtle slights, or outright disrespect from an in-law, with your own child standing by? Share your own experiences, your own wisdom, in the comments below. This channel is a safe space for all of us who have learned life's hardest lessons. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story, and share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. We have many similar stories of resilience, of reclaiming power, and of the profound lessons life teaches us when we least expect it. Thank you for listening to my story.